Be happy, happy, happy.
Be happy, be happy, mommy.
Come on, let's keep your chill. Enjoy this time.
Smile,
Smile, smile, my darling.
Honey, you gotta count your blessings.
Welcome to Creative Mamas Unplugged. We are your hosts. I'm Cherice Barton.
And I'm Shelly Hutchinson. Creative Mamas Unplugged is a podcast where we navigate the hell out of being a creative mom with humor and heart.
We will have honest conversations,
Hear wise words from fellow badass mamas.
and share hilarious stories around motherhood for some much-needed comic relief. Listen, motherhood is the most creative, most difficult job in the world. You are not alone, and you deserve to be happy. Hi, mamas. Today, we are thrilled to introduce the incredible Renee Niles, a trailblazer in the nonprofit arts world and a passionate advocate for dance and music. With over 30 years of experience, Renee has collaborated with more than 100 dance companies. She's commissioned groundbreaking works and has received numerous international prestigious honors, including recognition as an unsung hero by the California Legislative Black Caucus. She is a proud mom of 3. She is an inspiration to them. She is an inspiration to us. And we are so excited for this conversation. Get ready for an insightful and inspiring start to this 2-part series. Let's dive in. Beautiful Renee Niles.
Thank you so much for joining us. It is such a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you. It's a true honor to be here with you both. So thank you. And you might like to know that I am in my son's old bedroom.
I love that.
We always forget to ask that. That is huge. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I kicked him out. I mean, he has a bigger room upstairs. I think it's great, right? But yes, this is one way I think my husband is trying to keep me in the same house. So I thought you might appreciate knowing that this was once my son's bedroom and now it's my closet.
Oh, we appreciate it more than you know.
I do most of our recordings from my girls' room. Yeah, with the bunk beds in the back and the toys everywhere and like just the
And a
big
hamster. She does.
I love that. Love it.
You are Renee. I met you how many years ago? It's been a long time. And we know each other also through Azure. You've known my sister for a really long time.
Yes. Or
Yes.
at least been able to. It's funny for me. I like to watch artists over time. And so by the time I actually meet them in person, I probably feel like I know them far more than they ever know me.
Yeah, because
Yes.
you're seeing their creative self. When you're seeing
Exactly.
their creative self, you're really seeing the true person.
Yeah, over years and years. And some don't even always know, right, that I've been watching their work for quite some time.
Yeah, I think we connected when you were the COO at Gloria Kaufman. You've been a bright light in my life ever since.
Oh, well, thank you. That is
Yes.
very kind. Thank you.
Well, we are so honored to have you here today. You know, you've had such an incredibly multifaceted career in the arts, all while raising 3 beautiful children. We were wondering if you can give us a brief summary of your career path, how old your babies are now, and how you have managed to juggle motherhood over the years. And if you have any strategies that have helped you balance the demands of such a high-profile professional life with the responsibilities of motherhood.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a lot.
A loaded question.
I know, I love it. I know you had asked about the kids, and I suppose they're always your children, no matter what age they are. My kids are 28, 26, and almost 16. I guess in terms of my career, I feel very fortunate. It's I guess about 32 years, and I didn't quite know what I was getting into. I was undergrad at USC. I had started apprenticing as a dancer with a local company, Lula Washington Dance Theater. And then in order to pay for classes, I started working in the office. And before I knew it, I was taken to my first booking conference. And that was in 1993. In fact, that booking conference, it hadn't been back to the same location in all of those decades until this past August. So that was kind of interesting for me, right? In like 31 years to go back to for me where it all started to formulate, where I could see a field of individuals who knew each other, who supported each other. Some of them didn't always like each other. And that's where I met those that were my formal mentors, as well as my informal mentors. And many of them are still in my life today, which I'm grateful for. And so I started off eventually overseeing booking and touring of a national, international touring dance company. And through that is where I found the presenting side of things. And a lot of people in our field don't even understand or aware that there are these mediaries that we call ourselves presenters. Some might see us as producers, but I started to develop an interest in presenting. And that's what eventually took me to downtown Los Angeles on Grand Avenue, where eventually I had 4 different positions along this same street, because it's quite a cultural corridor here in LA. We're fortunate enough to have many of these cultural pockets all over greater Los Angeles. But in downtown, I started with, at the time, it was called California Plaza Presents, which free outdoor programming. Eventually, it became, or we changed the name to Grand Performances. I learned so much about presenting, about outdoor spaces, about community engagement. Particularly, I went there to learn more about music because I felt like I knew a good amount when it came to dance, and most presenters are multidisciplinary. Then I veered off of my path, and this very much aligns with being a parent. Unfortunately, at that time, I was also going through a separation and also figuring out work schedule. When you work in presenting, your days are easily 12, 13-hour days, sometimes 3, 4, 5 days a week. That was very much the case when I eventually, and more recently, was with the LA Phil. So at the time, I had 2 very young daughters. I was still an incredibly young mom at the time as well. I veered off of my so-called path and ended up becoming a grant maker working for the Los Angeles County Arts Commission. They're now a full-fledged department. What I didn't know is how much I would love this work. I relished the responsibility of having 300 grantees. Talk about multidisciplinary. I had grantees that went from American Film Institute, LA Philharmonic, LA Opera, to the smallest nonprofit arts gallery, dance company, music group, literary arts. So I learned so much about my own backyard, especially coming from a national touring perspective. And I was really lucky that at the time, the Arts Commission also oversaw and programmed the Ford Amphitheater. And because our executive director at the time knew that I came from the presenting programming side of things, in addition to running the grants program, I was also part of the team that selected artists and projects for the Ford. So I was still able to kind of keep that going. And I think it was doing that work as well as the capacity building work, having my marketing PR background, eventually went across the street, still on Grand Avenue, over to the Music Center, where I spent about 11 years, 12 seasons, overseeing primarily the dance programming, the dance series there. Eventually, my position at the Music Center grew, and I was overseeing all programming before I actually left Grand Avenue after many, many years and went to kind of back to USC to be part of the leadership helping to establish USC Kaufman with the visionary Jody Gates as the founding vice dean. And that was also another conscious decision as a parent, thinking, oh, maybe I need to actually slow down a bit. But it was both, I would say, a personal and a professional decision to go to USC because I thought, one, I wanted to make myself more competitive, especially for executive director positions. So I primarily went to USC Kaufman to help raise money. And then my position there evolved as well. But it was also, again, after 11, 12 years of being on the presenting side, traveling a lot to see work, and I was commissioning work as well. So going to USC really shifted things. It was the first time that I ever had the week between Christmas and New Year's off. Like that was never the case, right? When I was at the Arts Commission, I worked on New Year's Eve. And we had a 6-hour free program, which always felt like I was part of a gift that was given to Los Angeles County. But to actually be at USC and have time off and have a summer to be with the family. And at that point, my oldest was already off to college, right? The middle one ended up going to USC. So those have been, just kind of my journey, and sometimes being a mom influencing certain decisions that I've made. I will say on the other side, I have never called myself a workaholic. I just love what I do and trying to make the most positive impact. So that has taken me away from the kids a lot. And so if anything, I hope that they are seeing that as individuals, as human beings, that each of us have a responsibility to our community, however we define our community. And so that might mean that it takes me away. And I will say more recently, stepping away from USC Kaufman, I took on executive director of a education foundation here in our small town, and then was eventually convinced to go back to Grand Avenue in a position where I oversaw 5 departments for the LA Phil. And that included all of our programming, marketing, communications, government, community engagement, as well as learning, which included YOLA, the youth orchestra program. So to say the least, my family did not see me unless they came to a concert. And also going through the reality that so many of us are right now of having to care for our parents, that became more and more of a necessity. And so I have recently decided for the first time in my career to be fully freelance, which is a huge shift for me.
Your journey is so inspiring. You are such a force. You approach it all with such grace. And I love what you said about teaching your children to take care of their community. And I often think about that during times when I feel some mother guilt when my work takes me away from them. But I return to the fact that if I am inspiring them and if I am leading by example and showing them love and being there for them and being present with them when I am there with them, they will respect that and they will love that. So I love hearing that because that sort of reinforces what I hope to inspire in them.
I agree. I think for me, it's evolved over time, particularly with my 2 daughters. I was very young mom in my 20s, got married as soon as I graduated college. And so I've had to kind of figure that out as I've gone. I will share one of my favorite stories where my son Jackson, I think he was probably 5 at the time. And to your point, to kind of reduce the amount of guilt, I am known to do really short trips. I literally did Chicago, Montreal, and Russia in about 4 days total to see work, right?
Wow.
Because I needed to not be gone, right? As much as possible. And occasionally I had the great privilege of being a guest of the Minister of Culture, and that was the case twice with Taiwan, which has become one of my favorite places to visit. But when you're a guest of the Minister of Culture, you kind of have to do their schedule. So I had to be in Taiwan for, I think it was 4 or 5 days total, which again, for me, that's a long time to be gone. And I came back and my son Jackson had this morning ritual, which unfortunately does not exist anymore. But that morning ritual included him crawling into bed between his dad and I. But this particular day, so I came back late at night. He was already in bed. My husband, my now husband, works for Apple and had to go up to Cupertino early that morning. So essentially, our son went to sleep with one parent in the house and woke up to a different parent in the house. And so he crawls into bed that morning. He lays down, doesn't say much, and then he doesn't ask, like, where have you been? He just rolls over and says, "Is Dad in Cupertino?" And I say, "Yes." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So in that moment, one, I was a little shocked, like, did he not miss me? But I also received from him a certain level of confidence and assuredness that we're always there one way or the other, whether or not he can see us. And that was pretty powerful for me.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it's important to recognize those moments. Well, bravo to you because that shows that you are doing the right thing. And kudos to you for managing to like squish all of those responsibilities together to minimize your time away.
Well, I mean, we all make those kinds of decisions, right?
We
All the
do.
time.
The
Yeah.
fact that you threw in Russia in that trip, that threw me. I was like, I was expecting Boston again, or Russia and for that. If that isn't just the epitome of like, moms are gonna do it. You're gonna do it. You're gonna make sure you're there for your baby. I love the story of the crawling in the bed. Because when you said he woke up, he went to sleep with one parent and he woke up with the next, that's the ultimate tag team that you pull
Yep.
off and you just do it. And then I love that there, like you said, there's always going to be someone there. Someone's always there. And it's just the high five, pass it on, keep it moving. I love that energy behind that and that idea because it does come with just such forward thinking and momentum. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't always realize it, right? And we don't always, I don't know if we're always aware of even how our kids are receiving things. I would say our son maybe is a little more talkative, but also he has a different reality than his two sisters. And we've, as parents, including my ex-husband, who's like, and very active, so we've all tried to remain aware of that as much as possible. But for me, that was definitely a bit of a aha moment. Like, okay, maybe, and I think, Cherice, it goes back to what you're saying. When we are here trying to be as present as we can, and as supportive in their lives as we can be, but certainly very helpful, I think, to receive that acknowledgement, like, okay, maybe we're not completely messing things up.
Yes. It is so easy to be distracted for work emails to come in or things to come in, or for, as Shelly calls it, the ticker tape that's going on constantly to be with your child, but not really be with your child. And they feel that. And so, and I'm not perfect at it, but I try, even if it's just for little pockets during the day to make sure that I am present. And a lot of the time it's when I'm in the car with them, actually. It's like this bonding time between us where I'm super present, or I try to sit with Willow when I can and do her homework with her, or she does her homework, but she likes me to sit next to her, and to avoid picking up my phone or wanting to do the dishes or something because so much needs to be done. And so it's so hard to just sit there, and it's like a practice of mindfulness almost in a way, but it's so important to them, but it's not easy.
No, and I think it evolves as they evolve. How we connect with them when they're 5, 7, 15, right, is so different. And then my brother and I are 13 years apart. And I think also being the female, quite frankly, growing up, I was always older. I felt like I was older. I felt like an aunt, a lot of times. And so all that to say, in a lot of ways, we were kind of two only children. So, no one told me how different children could be, even if they're growing up in the same household. I had no clue, right? Different needs, different personalities. And so that was also something that I had to learn, maybe in a difficult way. And so, right to your point, and just being aware that they have different needs and different ways in which they want to or need to interact with you.
I love that so much. You highlighted something that I feel like is not discussed with new parents at all. Kids are wired differently. And, we talked about these like books that you get on one of our previous episodes that are, handed to you and saying like, use this as a reference, and it's all well intended. But why wouldn't I just use that same book for my second and my third? Why not? I have it. I'm going to pull that damn book out again. And does it work for like your multiple children? No. And I feel like that should be a heavier topic of conversation for new moms, or for moms of when you have your second, I guess, especially, which is just prepare yourself, because this guy is probably going to be stark different from the other kid, right? Like my first kid was pretty like easy, I guess, if you want to say that, right? And then my second came along, was like, nope, we're not doing it this way now. See, we're going to do it this way. And I had no idea. So I like that you brought that up, because I feel like it's an important piece of information for people who have authority to talk about it, to talk about it and to educate us.
Yep. It's so true. And to your point, I felt like I kind of had to learn it through trial and error. And particularly because my two daughters, they're about 2.5 years apart. Part of me probably forced them to be friends. I love the fact that they are incredibly close now. And I think they have been their entire lives, but still very different personalities, and now very different adult women. But that's also been a joy for me to watch as well.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So we've been having conversations, and this is more geared towards creatives, moms who have had creative careers and or are in the beginnings of a creative career, and they have this passion and love that they've been pursuing their entire lives, and decide to have children, and or they have children, and they're trying to navigate this career. And I'm speaking more about the people that you mentor and support. So the dancers, the choreographers, the aspiring, company managers, directors who might be feeling a bit lost and or unsure of how to navigate this sort of uncertain career path, which we all know is very uncertain and often has an end date. And, some performers want to continue as long as they can. Some try to transition earlier, but even those that transition out of being a performer into the next phase, it's very daunting. But while also having children, I have a lot of friends who completely just let it go, and they have sadness and they have regret, but they made that choice, and that choice is also admirable. But I'm just curious if you have any advice to any of those aspiring moms or moms out there who might be struggling with, am I doing the right thing? How do I do this? Or if there's moms that you've been seeing that have found ways to move forward.
More recently, the last couple of years, I have connected more with others in our field, but I'm actually on both sides, the administrative side, hopeful executive directors, choreographers, tenured faculty who are new moms. And so they have come to me for advice, but I'm not necessarily one to give advice, but I can share my understanding, my learning, and how and maybe my culpability, because I certainly recognize that in a lot of ways I have prioritized my career. But the reason I've been able perhaps to do that and not feel incredibly guilty is the support system. I received an award several years ago, and people laughed when I thanked my ex-husband. And I think, most of them know me, and despite our divorcing, he's been incredibly supportive. And so sometimes when I have had to travel, he's kept the girls longer than typical. His mom, my, ex-mother-in-law, for many years was the one who picked up my daughters from school. And that gave me the flexibility, and also my ex-husband, to be able to pick them up when we needed to. Similarly, my current mother-in-law, and just always being there, especially with our son, spending multiple nights and supporting in that way. So I think being able to have that multi-layered support system has been really helpful. And that support system truly supporting my work. And I think half the time maybe they didn't even quite know what it was I did, right? Unless occasionally they came to a performance. But I think that has really helped. I'm also hearing more and more that there's more of us that are talking to each other and supporting each other. And I don't know, I didn't quite feel like I had that. And in fact, a lot of my former bosses, which I realized about 10 years ago, either didn't have children at all. And that was, as you had said, that was maybe a decision that they had made. Or if they did have children, they were adults. They were already in their 30s. And so it wasn't until perhaps I always felt a certain level of support, but I also perhaps didn't even share certain things or needs and just kind of push through. And so I do find that there's a lot more of awareness, what it means to be a caregiver nowadays. And that was not necessarily the case for me professionally.
I wanted to ask a question about something that you had said earlier, where you had said your decision to move to USC was both a professional and a personal, like it was you took those priorities and you found a way to align them and found something that satisfied both of those needs. And I'm just curious because that hit me really hard, because I've never really thought about what it feels like to find a balance with a personal and professional choice. Because I think for a lot of creatives, you have a gig or you have an offering or you have an opportunity and you grab it because there's someone right behind you just waiting. And you recognize the urgency sometimes of taking that important work. But then how there are times where maybe it just is not possible because of personal reasons or because of our roles at home and in our family. And I just found that a very profound statement. And I'm wondering if there's a method to get to that point. Is it something you always consider when you're taking on work? Because the work you are doing, by the way, is not just stars and lights. It's such important, deep work. So I imagine the reason behind taking some of the work that you do and taking some of these initiatives on have to do with more than just personal. It's probably aligns with some of what you said with giving back to your community. But I'm wondering, how do you do that? How do you find that professional and personal alignment when choosing what work you're gonna take?
It's true. It's hard, right? And I will say that was also part of my challenge at USC Kaufman. I got to a point where I didn't feel as creative. That certainly became a little bit of that challenge. But to your point, I was fully aware in my decision making what was influencing that decision. I will say, though, to your point, and this is something that I've shared even with my own daughters, that when you're younger or you're newer in your career, there's a point where you do kind of have to just keep saying yes, right? To make a name, to build a reputation, for people to know that you can do great work. And so I also feel like the last 10 years of my career, that it has been more so the ability to not feel like I have to say yes. In fact, with the LA Phil, I said no probably twice. Um, And part of the no was I knew that the LA Phil was gigantic. And by saying yes, that I am, for the most part, fully giving myself over to this work, into this position and this organization. And so I was reluctant. And also, I had just started this executive director position for 6 months. And when I make a commitment, I really want to see that through. And that for me, that's more than a year. I also joked that the Education Foundation was Culver City, where I live. I literally have board members around the corner. Like they know where I live. I can't just leave them. So I do think that being so-called more established, being in the field for some time, that I think to your point has allowed me to make decisions through multiple filters. And sometimes those filters have included what might best benefit the family one way or another.
Wow. Your children must be so proud of you.
I don't know. I certainly I hope so. And I have said for a long time, I want to make them proud.
I keep thinking how lucky your girls are and your son.
Aw.
But having a mom like you and doing what you do and making such a strong impact on the world with such grace and beauty and honesty, lucky. I imagine they're just, like we were saying, so proud of their mom.
Creative Mamas Unplugged is produced by Breatheasy Productions with music by Jeremy Jurin. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to give my mama 5 stars and keep coming back. Thanks to us kids, there are plenty of stories to tell. And you are not alone. Bye for now.